Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Innovation is more than a buzzword for Saul Kaplan. He pushed Rhode Island to embrace a new knowledge economy as head of the Economic Development Corporation, and now leads the Business Innovation Factory, a research and development hub in Providence. More than 3 years after leaving the EDC, Kaplan is out with a new book, and his former employer is in turmoil thanks to 38 Studios. What's Kaplan's vision for the Rhode Island economy, and how would he repair the EDC? This week on Executive Suite, the Business Innovation Factory's Saul Kaplan. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Saul, thank you for being here today.
Ted, it's great to be here. Congratulations on your new show.
Thanks.
It's
you knew
fantastic.
me. You knew me at PBN when I was just the rookie reporter there.
Right.
So here, you never know. We have a lot to talk about. I want to get to the new book, but we've got to start with 38 Studios. Everyone's talking about it. I mean, I want to know, first and foremost, you left the EDC, I believe, December 08.
That's correct.
And the deal went through July 2010. Obviously, no discussion when you were there about it, or long before that.
It wasn't on our radar screen.
What did you think that summer of 2010 when you saw this deal moving through and heard about it, you know, just as a private citizen? Did you think, oh, maybe this will work? What was your thought?
Well, my first thought was, I couldn't believe that the General Assembly had approved a $125 million loan guarantee fund when I was the director, and even before me, when Mike McMahon was there previously. We'd been trying for years to get a $50 million fund approved, where we were never going to commit more than 10% of the fund, or $5 million, to any one deal. And we were never going to be the first capital in. We were always going to be the conclusion of the capital raise. So all the risk capital. So this was a radical change from the proposal to make it that big with no limits on the level of the loan from what you originally proposed. We got nowhere with the proposal for a number of years, and then the next thing I read is that it's $125 million, and then right after that we learn about the 38 Studios deal. So this thing has been a mess right from the start. You know, it's inconceivable to me that the $125 million bond guarantee fund wasn't always about 38 Studios, and I think all leadership, both in the executive and legislative branch, had to have known, or else why would they approve it when they didn't approve $50 million for years before that? I was always surprised.
What did you hear when you were making the pitch? You know, I've heard the pitch was, hey, we need something for intellectual property companies that don't have bricks and mortar things. Was there just no interest? Did they have doubts about it when you talked to legislative leaders and others about the idea?
Oh, I don't think they wanted to put the tool in our hands, to be honest with you. We needed a new set of tools. Everything we had at EDC was designed for an industrial era, you know, to support bricks and mortar companies. And now, as you know, we live in a knowledge economy where the assets that we need to develop aren't plant equipment and bricks and mortar. So we were trying to find a smart way that mitigated the risk that would allow us to play a role in that. I had no clue at the time that we would do a deal as large and put as many of our eggs into a basket like we did with 38 Studios. And now, of course, every week, you know, we get more details about this deal. You know, it was wrong from the start, and it's still wrong today. And now what we need to do is figure out how to get ourselves out of it, how to recover as much as we can. We'll never recover all of it, but we need to move past it, Ted. We need to get beyond this, because with 11+% unemployment, we need to transform this economy. Tweaks are not going to do it.
Now, you just said there it was a bad idea from the start with the deal. So you don't buy the idea that Governor Chafee killed the company at the very end and it was going to be all right. You just don't think this was going to work, the structure, the financing, and everything else.
No, it was a bad deal from the beginning. It should never have been done. Now, we can talk about how it's been managed after it was done, and there are some things, you know, obviously with hindsight, you know, that could have been done. But the most important thing that should have been done is the deal shouldn't have been done in the first place.
Now, you were head of the EDC. When did you come in? You were deputy director and then director.
I spent 6 years. I call this the accidental bureaucrat phase of my
yeah, because you weren't a government person.
No, I come out of the private sector, but I've fallen in love with Rhode Island. I think it has incredible potential, and I believe that our economy has to be about innovation and entrepreneurship, which is what I focus on. And I spent 6 years, 3+ as the #2 guy there, where I led the development and strategy effort. And then when Mike McMahon went back to Wall Street, the governor asked me to join his cabinet and become the director. I loved my time in state government. I think we have such potential here in the state, but we're going to have to be bolder if we're going to transform this economy.
Wasn't that the whole idea here, though? A bold $75 million bet on a game company in a new industry?
Yeah, but that's not what I mean by bold. What I mean by bold is a bold vision for the kind of economy we need to create, and then getting both the public and private sector rallied around that and aligning our programs and our investments to that. The government should play a leadership and a catalyst role. It should set the direction. It should put together a set of programs that can catalyze the private sector to act in a way that's going to improve our economy. Making one bet for $75 million in a risky venture, is not my idea of being bold.
I remember you were taken to the woodshed at a legislative hearing during your tenure once the economy started to slip off the rails here. And there does seem to be this thing on Smith Hill sometimes with blaming the EDC for the entire economy. Did you feel put upon at the EDC? Like there was always you were being put at cross currents? Or what was the feeling inside EDC and as head of the EDC?
Well, first of all, I loved my time at EDC. I think we were trying to change the conversation, and I could see the beginnings of that, and we were making a real difference. And I'm proud of some of the programs that we put in place while I was at EDC. But EDC bashing is a state sport here. There's no question about that. And we're going to have to do better if we're going to put in place a platform to change this economy. No question.
Do you think there's now a group has been convened by Governor Chafee, led by John Simmons of RIPEC, to examine the EDC, look at its structure, look top to bottom? There have been hints that the governor might be interested in moving it away from being a quasi-independent agency to a department under him. I think New York does something like that. I mean, do you think EDC should be kept in its current form? What would you advise John Simmons and them?
Well, first of all, I think the structure isn't the place to start, right? I'm less concerned about what form it takes and what the structure is, and I'm much more concerned about leadership, to paint a vision for what kind of economy we all want to work together to create. That's what's missing. It's that leadership that's missing. How you organize underneath that, whether it's a quasi public-private platform or whether it's a Department of Commerce, within the DOA, that is less important. I know everybody gets hung up on what the organizational structure will be. We should be a lot more hung up on where we're going and how we're going to transform this economy, create higher wage jobs that everybody in our state can participate in, create an education and workforce development system that people can participate in so that they can take part in this economy.
A lot of that sounds like the same proposals that were put forward in 2008. You put out a big report with recommendations not too long before you resigned. Do you still think that's fundamentally the direction to go for Rhode Island?
Well, I believe that our economy has to be about innovation and entrepreneurship. The old industrial economy is not coming back as much as we might like for that to happen. Will the economy get better as the national economy improves? Yes, but we're going to be right back to where we were before, which is a lower wage economy, but that's not creating the number and quality of jobs that we need. And to fix that is not a tweak. It's not the same approach that we've taken before. We need to be bolder and take more transformational approaches to that. And the public sector has a very important role to lead and to catalyze that and to get private sector leaders and individuals to work together in one direction. We have to change our psychology, Ted. Our psychology is really negative right now, and the economy is all about our psychology.
Animal spirits.
It is about animal spirits. It's about investing one more dollar or hiring one more employee, and you don't do that if you feel negatively about the place, and we do right now, and we need to change that.
All right, we have to take a break, but we'll talk much more about that and about Saul's new book. Stick with us. You're watching Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. My guest this week is Saul Kaplan, former Executive Director of the Rhode Island Economic Development Corporation and now head of the Business Innovation Factory, and also author of a new book, The Business Model Innovation Factory. A little bit different there with the title, but we're close. And it's fascinating, and it will be familiar to people familiar with sort of what you think about the economy and where businesses need to go. You think there's not enough space being made by business leaders in their organizations to experiment, to think about where things are going. Give me the basic thesis of the book.
Well, the technical term I use is we don't try enough stuff. We really don't. We need to try more stuff. We need to get more comfortable with experimenting, with taking ideas, off of the whiteboard and get them onto the real world ground to see what works, right? We can't plan our way there. We have to experiment and try our way there. But we've built a culture that doesn't really reward people for experimenting and trying and failing, right? So what do? We do the safe stuff. Right? We don't do the bolder, more experimental stuff. I believe the 21st century is all about reinventing ourselves as individuals, our organizations, whether they're for-profit companies or government agencies or schools. All organizations need to learn how to reinvent themselves, or even our community. We're talking about Rhode Island, and I believe Rhode Island needs to reinvent itself.
Now, you must sometimes run into skeptics who say, "Oh, buzzword, you sound like a Dilbert cartoon, so you got the synergy, and we've got innovation, we've got this." I mean, but I know you really believe this in your heart. I mean, how do you make it practical to someone who maybe is running a business at home and saying, "Oh, I don't have time for all this. I'm just trying to make payroll"?
Well, the good news is that it's the innovator's day, because during really tough economic times, people want to hear new, fresh thinking and new ideas. So people that are focused on innovation get a hearing today, whereas they didn't before. The bad news is you're absolutely right. We've turned it into a buzzword, right? Everybody's an innovator. Everything's an innovation. And of course, when that happens, no one is and nothing is. We have to get below the buzzwords. What I do in the book, The Business Model Innovation Factory, is I lay out the case for reinventing ourselves, why that's important in the 21st century, but then I lay out some very specific principles that I've seen in innovators and organizations that want to reinvent themselves, and a very detailed roadmap of how you do it. How do we go from tweaks to transformation? How do we carve out the space where we can be more experimental, where we can intentionally iterate or try new things so that we can reinvent ourselves? Rhode Island is perfectly positioned for this. We can turn our size into a real strategic weapon. I've always said it's our red ruby slippers. Why is it that we're not taking advantage of our size to reinvent healthcare, to reinvent education, so that everyone else in the country and the world is looking at us? Right, is watching us build and implement these new solutions, and then that's how the economy is going to get stronger, because companies here are going to get more competitive, and we're going to get investment and companies that are going to want to be here because it's a unique place where you can innovate and try new ideas.
Now, favorite example of mine that you have in here right at the top of the book, Blockbuster and Netflix.
Yep.
Tell that story, how you view that.
Well, I use the example of Blockbuster and Netflix as the example of why you have to reinvent yourself. Think about it, right? Blockbusters was huge. I mean, in Rhode Island, it's always where it used to be, where something used to be. So I used to go to the Blockbusters on North Main Street, and every Rhode Islander can say where they went. At the peak, they had 5,000 stores, right? That's where we went to get our movies so that we could watch them at home. What happened when DVD technology came out? What did Blockbusters do? It does what every organization does. It put it right on the shelf next to the video cassettes and said, "Come to our store and now you can get a DVD." Why is it that they didn't experiment with entirely new ways to get access to movies? Along comes Netflix. Netflix got founded by a guy by the name of Reed Hastings, who got pissed off because he didn't want to pay the late fees at Blockbusters, and said, "I can mail these DVDs to you at home," right? That's not rocket science. Like, maybe we'll mail these DVDs. Took the idea early on to Blockbusters, and what did Blockbusters do? Said, "You're a gnat. You're a small niche. Go away. You're never going to amount to anything." And of course, Netflix, became huge. Blockbusters went bankrupt. Billions of dollars of shareholder wealth that got lost because they were so stuck on their current business model, the way they delivered value to their customers, that they didn't experiment with any new ways to do it.
Now let me challenge you on this,
Go right
because
ahead.
I just yesterday, CNET has a special report on what happened with Reed Hastings and Netflix over
Yeah.
the last year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
listening to him, he went for the split the DVD and the streaming, and he quickster and all that, and it blew up in his face. Almost he was trying to take this maybe a step too far. We're innovating too fast or something. How do you view what happened to Reed Hastings in the past year?
Well, perfect. And the reason I tell the story in the book is because, and I use the phrase Netflixed, like the real imperative for all of us in the 21st century is to avoid being Netflixed. Even Netflix has to worry about being Netflixed. And in fact, that's exactly what's going on, as you point out, right? Of course, now it's not about DVDs, it's about streaming online. And I think they waited too long to experiment with new approaches
But he was
of
not
getting at
rewarded
streaming.
by Wall Street or by customers.
When he finally got on to experimenting with it, there was enormous backlash, and the way they organized around it was strange. And the movie is not done yet to see what's going to happen with Netflix at all. But so the lesson I take away from that is every organization has to be worried about being Netflixed, even Netflix. So the job is never done. You have to always experiment with new ways to deliver value. We have to always be thinking about how we're going to reinvent ourselves. None of us end up doing exactly what we thought we were going to do, when we were in school. None of us do. Yet, when do they teach us how to reinvent ourselves? When in our education process do we learn the confidence and the ability to experiment with new things that we can do, new things our organizations can do to change the way we deliver value or solve problems?
I mentioned you run the Business Innovation Factory nonprofit in Providence. Sometimes I struggle to describe it. I've called it almost a mix of a think tank and an R&D lab. How do you describe it to people?
Yeah, it's a real-world laboratory to get ideas, off of the whiteboard and onto the ground. How do we experiment with new and better ways to deliver value? So if you're an organization, how do you do R&D for new business models? If you're a community, how do you do R&D for better ways to deliver value to citizens and the consumers that live, within your country? Why is it that we don't do R&D why don't hospitals do R&D for new hospital systems? Why is it that schools don't do R&D for better schools and better school systems? We have to learn how to try more stuff, and we know that tweaks of the current approach is not good enough. We're not going to fix Rhode Island's economy by tweaking or playing at the margin. The report that came out this week that said we were number 50, as a place to do business. I mean, do you think we're going to get off the bottom of that list by small incremental change? I mean, what are we going to do, go to 49 or 48? We need to transform the way we do business here in Rhode Island. We need to learn how to create a business model innovation factory to try new approaches while we're still pedaling the bicycle of the current approach. You have to do both in the 21st century.
All right, we have to take another break. We're going to talk more about that CNBC report Saul mentioned right after. Stick with us. You're watching Executive Suite.
Executive Suite, made possible in part by the generous support of the Rhode Island Foundation.
Welcome back to Executive Suite. Our guest, Saul Kaplan, former head of the EDC, and he runs the Business Innovation Factory. Saul, you mentioned it in the last segment, but CNBC report this week, we're number 50, dead last for business in Rhode Island. What do you make of that kind of report?
Well, it's been going on for some time. I mean, we've been living at the bottom of a lot of these lists. You would think that that would be the wake-up call, for us to try a different way, that the way we've been doing it isn't working. Let's do it a different way. Let's try. Let's experiment. And I'm not sure I hear it. I still see a lot of finger pointing and a lot of negativity, and we have to learn how to get that behind us.
I'm wondering, these rankings have become almost a partisan thing where I see people on the left side saying, who cares what the CNBC says, they're just trying to make us, cut social services, and conservatives saying, see, this is what we mean, cut taxes and regulations.
Right.
How big a deal do you see the taxes and regulations piece of holding Rhode Island back?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was going to say a pox on both of their houses, and when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship, I'm not sure either party, does anywhere near a sufficient job of articulating how we're going to create the future economy. All right, we're still bottom bogged down in a lot of these things. I do think business climate is important, right? And we need to create a far more favorable business climate here in Rhode Island.
What do you think of concretely with that?
Regulations, taxes, access to labor and talent that we need, the ability to get at land when it's important to build something new. Land, labor, and capital were the original ones, and regulation, kind of comes on top of that. We need a better business climate, and that'll help move us slightly up, on that list. The problem is just having a good business climate is necessary but not sufficient. You still have to have a compelling argument for what kind of economy you're going to be and how you're going to differentiate yourself. And Rhode Island hasn't figured that out, right? There's no clarity, there's no leadership, there's no uniformity about the way we talk about what our future economy can be and should be. It's what I was trying to do in bringing the innovation and entrepreneurship discussion more to the forefront. I believe it should be central to our conversation.
If Governor Chafee came to you and said, Saul, we have a lot going on, I need to give a specific task to focus on first and foremost as sort of trying to improve the economy in Rhode Island, what's the top of mind thing to you?
Well, obviously we need to get EDC or whatever form that's going to take, back into the game. The governor.
So EDC matters.
EDC or a platform to implement economic policy is really important. But let's start with the policy. What is our vision for the future of Rhode Island's economy, right? What kind of economy do we want, right? What is it that we're going to bring, to that conversation that's unique and different here in Rhode Island? I believe it's about innovation and entrepreneurship. Let's organize around that. Let's set in place a series of policies and very specific programs that can catalyze that, both across the public and private sector. It's going to take 10 years. I mean, Rhode Islanders don't want to hear this, right? They want the quick fix. How are we going to turn this around this year?
And can you blame them with 11% unemployment?
But there is no quick fix. There is no quick fix. The unemployment rate will improve slightly, as the national economy starts to improve. But this narrative that we're the first in and the last out of every recession.
You always hear that's just baked in the cake for Rhode Island.
Yeah, it's almost as if Rhode Islanders have bought into this narrative, first in and last out. I don't buy into that. I mean, I would hope more Rhode Islanders wouldn't buy into that narrative. Let's create a new narrative. It doesn't have to be that way. But what Rhode Islanders don't want to hear is that whatever set of policies you put in place, it's going to take 10 years. You don't transform an economy, in 1, 2, or 3 years. It just doesn't happen. You want to transform this economy, you need one set of policies that are bought into, that the public and private sector can rally around, and it needs to be in place over a 10-year period across administrations, right? And that's something we have not been able to pull together. But if we want to really change this economy, that's what it's going to take.
Where do you see room for optimism around? What makes you optimistic? What makes you stay here?
Well, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about Rhode Island. I love living here. This is an incredible place. It's quirky, no question about that, but it's a great place to live. It's interesting. It is so diverse. There's incredible talent, in this state. It's just too fragmented and too siloed. We're not taking advantage of our size, right? Our size is really our strategic weapon, and we haven't figured out how to play it. We've been living on the negative edge of that sword. We need to climb up onto the positive edge of the sword that is our size, which can give us an advantage in the innovation and entrepreneurship front. I'm also incredibly optimistic as I watch my children.
About 10 seconds left, quick.
My children and the millennial generation, give me great cause for optimism. This generation gets
welcome.
it. You are welcome. But this generation gets it.
That's all the time we have for this week. I want to thank my guest, Saul Kaplan. His new book is The Business Model Innovation Factory, and it's on sale now. Perhaps you'd still be able to buy it at Borders if the executives there had read it, right? If you missed any of the show, you can catch it on our website, WPRI.com. Thanks for watching here on MyRI TV. See you next week on Executive Suite.